I've just been over to old Charlie's funeral. I've seen old Nobby at the graveside. He ain't been outside for nigh on 6 year. I says to him, "How old are you, Nobby?" He says, 98. I said, "Soon be your turn, won't it?" And he laughed. "I shan't die," he says. "I knows it." Shouted at me like that. "I shan't die," he says. I won't be surprised if he don't too. Well, there was a subject over in Oldbury, lived to be 112. He never died. They went into him one morning, he wasn't there. No one ever seed the going of him. That was old George Eliot. What was? Was a wonderful good workman, was Charlie. Turn his hand to anything. Wonderful man with horses. Old Mr. Buckmaster wouldn't let anybody else handle his box if he could help it. He used to give him dandelion leaves. Used to make his coat come off all lovely like he'd been knocked all over with a little hammer. Spent most of his Sundays lying down with horses at stables. Did most of his courting over at Mr. Buckmaster's stables. "If you want to see me," he used to say to the girls, "you'll have to come down to the stables." Or I says to him one time, I said, "You mind that schoolmistress over at Slapton used to give you £half-a-crown a week to walk out with her?" And he said, "Ah," and he laughed. He had about 120 half-crowns on him at one time. Married 2 sisters in the end. Rare one for the girls was Charlie. In fact, we both was, only he was worse. He used to say, "I'm going to scatter my maker's image about a bit before I'd be took." And he did too. I mind the new vicar, he came up to me one time, he said, "I can't make it out," he says. "Most of the children in this here village looks alike to me." And I laughed, but he never seemed to follow me, so I'd give it up. That was the year Mrs. Harvey's apple tree blowed down. I mind me and old Charlie was helping build a new barn over by the crab tree. We was on the roof fixing in these here rafters and cross ties to hold 'em in like. An archaeologist comes by who was digging over on the Diplot. "Oi!" he says. "You know what you've done?" he says. I says, "No, sir." He says, "You made a triangle." I says, "Have I? I didn't know." He says, "That's indestructible," he said. "If anybody tries to catch you out," he said, "no matter who they are, you just tell them, no 2 sides of a triangle is together greater than the third. That'll have 'em. It's unanswerable." I mind Mr. Buckmaster, he caught me taking out a rabbit from one of his snares. Red-handed he did too. I had to go up about it. The old magistrates, he said to me, he said, "You got anything to say?" he says. I says, "Yes, sir. No 2 sides of a triangle is together greater than the third." That had him. He didn't know what to say. He had to ask his clerk. They had their heads together for about 5 minutes, and then he said, 10 shilling. I reckon they'd have made that £1 if I had to known that. The next day I'd seen this archaeologist and I told him all about it, and he laughed, and then he said, "Well, I suppose we'll have to teach you all about the square on the Pythagoras," he said. "If you know that," he said, "that's half the battle." But he never showed me.